Okay, so have you ever gotten lost looking for the best English learning book?
Yeah, totally. It's like every website promises you'll be fluent in like a month.
Right. And we're not saying those books are bad or anything.
It's more that everyone has different goals, right?
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today.
We're going way beyond just listing books.
Yeah, it's about figuring out what works for you.
Like, what are the strengths and weaknesses of each book?
And most importantly, who will actually benefit from it.
Because finding the right resource is huge EE.
Totally. Like you wouldn't use a hammer to,
Saw wood.
yeah.
Exactly.
We're helping you pick the right tool for the job. Your English learning toolbox.
I love that.
Ah.
So yeah, forget those like top 10 lists.
We're your guides. Your Sherpas taking you to the top. Fluency Mountain, here we come. Love it. And a big part of that is figuring out where you are right now.
Exactly. Like, how good is your English at this moment?
Because you need the right challenge, not something way too easy or crazy hard.
Right. So we'll be sharing tips on how to do that throughout this deep dive.
Perfect. So are you ready to, are you ready to tackle some grammar?
Let's do it. Though I know for some people, grammar is like a scary word.
It doesn't have to be. A good place to start is English Grammar in Use by Raymond Murphy.
Oh, that one's a classic for a reason.
Right. It comes up all the time. And what I like is he doesn't just tell you the rules.
He explains WHY they work that way.
Yes. And that makes it stick so much better.
Totally. You're not just memorizing, you're actually understanding.
It's great for studying on your own, but I've even seen it used in classrooms. Oh, absolutely. It's super versatile.
And it gets results. We actually heard from Ahmed from Egypt. He really struggled with grammar, but then he found this book.
And what happened?
He said it was like a light bulb moment for him. It finally clicked.
That's what we like to hear. See, different things work for different learners.
Speaking of clicking, let's move on to vocabulary.
Because having a strong vocabulary is like...
A superpower.
Yes, exactly. And one book that can help you unlock that superpower is Word Power Made Easy by Norman Lewis.
This one is great because it's not about memorizing a million random words.
It's about understanding how words are built, right?
Yes, you learn about roots, prefixes, suffixes.
So you can start to see the connections between words.
And then you can figure out new words on your own.
Exactly. It's incredibly useful for everyday conversation. Oh, absolutely. But it's also super helpful if you're planning on taking, like, standardized tests like the TOEFL.
That can really boost your score.
Yeah.
And speaking of vocabulary, we also have English Vocabulary in Use by Michael McCarthy and Felicity O'Dell.
This one's different because it focuses on learning vocabulary in context.
Yes. It's not just random lists of words.
They have all these different themes like work, travel, daily life.
So you're learning the words you'll actually UE in those situations.
Right. It's super practical.
We actually heard from Maria from Spain, who went from being scared to speak English to having full conversations.
Wow, that's amazing. All thanks to this book.
She said it was a game changer. But sometimes you want to go beyond individual words and really focus on writing.
Crafting those beautiful sentences.
Exactly. And for that, there's a classic we have 80 to mention.
Even though it's not specifically for English learners.
Even though, yes, The Elements of Style by Strunk and White.
Oh, that's a good one. It's like the Bible of writing.
Pretty much. It teaches you how to write clearly, concisely.
And it's not just for, like, novelists or whatever.
Yeah, anyone can benefit from this book.
I used to be terrified of messing up grammar in work emails.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah. But this book helped me realize that it's okay to break the rules sometimes.
As long as you're doing it strategically.
Exactly. And sometimes a well-placed dash is all you need. But for those who want to sound more natural when they speak English.
Ah, yes. Let's talk about Fluent English by Barbara Rafe Snyder. This one's great for that.
It really gets into those, like, subtle things that can trip you up.
It does, like connected speech. You know how words kind of blend together when we're talking naturally?
Right. And, like, where you put the emphasis in a word.
Exactly. Syllable stress. That can totally change the meaning sometimes. And then there's intonation.
Like how your voice goes up and down.
Yes. It's like the music of English. And this book really breaks it all down.
I like that. It's like learning the secret code of how native speakers talk.
It is. And once you know the code, it's so much easier to decode everything else. We actually heard from a reader who said they used to feel like they were just reciting lines from a textbook.
Oh, I know that feeling.
But after reading Fluent English, they said it was like they were finally having real conversations.
That's awesome. Okay, so speaking of real-life learning, let's talk about visual learners.
Yes. Because some people Learn best by seeing things, not just reading about them.
Totally. And for those learners, a picture dictionary can be a game changer.
Especially for beginners.
Yeah.
Like the Oxford Picture Dictionary is a really good one.
Oh, yeah, that one's a classic. I mean, who doesn't love looking at pictures, right?
Exactly. And it's not just for kids. Visual learning can be helpful at any age.
And for any level, like some people just naturally gravitate towards a more visual style of learning.
Right. And for those learners, we have to mention English Made Easy by Jonathan Crichton and Peter Coaster.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one. It's so different from a regular textbook.
It really is. It uses a lot of visuals like pictures and diagrams.
And it's really conversational, like you're having a chat with a friend who happens to be an English teacher.
Yes. It's super engaging. They use a lot of dialogues and activities to make learning more interactive and fun.
Definitely more fun than just memorizing grammar rules, right?
Yeah.
But speaking of grammar, remember how we were talking about figuring out your English level?
Right. Like, where do you even start?
It's kind of like trying to find your place on a map, you know? You need to know where you are to figure out how to get where you want to go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you actually figure out your English level?
That is the million-dollar question. What do you think?
Well, a good starting point is to think about your past experiences with English. Have you studied it before?
Right, like did you take classes in school?
Exactly. Or maybe you've used language learning apps or websites. Think about how long you studied for and what level you reached.
It's about taking stock of what you already know, basically.
Exactly. And then think about how comfortable you feel with different aspects of English. Like, can you understand everyday conversations?
Can you read news articles or books?
What about writing emails or social media posts?
It's about pinpointing your strengths and weaknesses.
Right. And then finally, think about your goals. What do you want to be able to do with English?
Because that will influence what kind of resources you need.
For sure. Like, if you need English for work, you'll probably want to focus on business English materials.
Makes sense. But let's say you really want to dive deep into grammar, like you want to know the ins and outs of how it all works.
In that case, you need to check out Practical English Usage by Michael Swan.
Now, this one is not for the faint of heart.
It's definitely more comprehensive than English Grammar in Use.
If English grammar in use is like a map, this one is like the Google Earth view, you know?
It covers everything. Complex grammar points, tricky usage rules.
Even things that native speakers get confused about sometimes.
It's an incredible resource for anyone who wants to master the nuances of English grammar.
It really shows you that there's always more to learn, no matter how advanced you are.
Absolutely. Speaking of always learning, let's talk about idioms.
Oh, idioms. Those can be tricky.
They can be a real head-scratcher, even for advanced learners. Like, what does kick the bucket even mean?
Right. It doesn't sound anything like what it means.
Exactly. And that's why we need to talk about English Idioms in Use by Michael McCarthy and Felicity O'Dell.
This book is great because it explains those weird expressions in a way that actually makes sense.
It gives you clear definitions and lots of examples.
So you can see how idioms are used in real-life situations.
And you know what? One learner told us that they used to be terrified of idioms. They just didn't get them.
But after using that book, they said they actually started to enjoy idioms.
That's great. It's like, once you understand the code, it's not so intimidating anymore.
Exactly. And speaking of decoding, let's not forget about those who are just starting their English journey.
Yes. The beginners. It can feel like a whole different world when you're first starting out, right?
Totally. Like, where do you even begin?
Right. There's so much information out there, it's easy to get overwhelmed.
For sure. So for those brand new beginners, what would you recommend? Like, what's a good starting point?
Well, one book that comes to mind is Easy English, Step by Step, for ESL Learners by Danielle Pelletier.
Okay, I've heard of that one. What do you like about it?
It's great because it really breaks things down into manageable steps.
Like baby steps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It starts with the absolute basics, like the alphabet and basic grammar.
So you're not just thrown into the deep end.
Exactly. It's all about building a strong foundation, step by step.
I like that. It's like learning to walk before you can run, right?
Yes. And we actually heard from a beginner who said that this book gave them the confidence to keep going.
Oh, that's awesome. What did they say?
They said it felt like having a patient tutor right there with them every step of the way.
That's so important when you're starting out, like having someone to hold your hand and guide you through it.
Absolutely. So yeah, we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? We've talked about grammar books, vocabulary builders, even books about idioms.
It's like a whole library up in here. But you know, it's interesting because even though all these books are different, they all have one thing in common.
What's that?
They're all tools, right? Like they're here to help you reach your language goals.
Exactly. And just like with any tool, you need to choose the right one for the job.
And the right tool might change depending on what you're trying to do or where you are in your learning journey.
Absolutely. What works for you as a beginner might not be the best fit once you're more advanced.
Right. So it's important to keep reassessing, keep asking yourself.
What are my goals? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses?
And don't be afraid to try new things. Just because everyone else loves a certain book doesn't mean it's the right book for you.
Exactly. You have to find what clicks for you. So yeah, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want listeners to take away from all of this?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's about remembering that learning English is a journey. It's not about finding a quick fix or a magic solution. It's about enjoying the process, embracing the challenges, and celebrating the small victories along the way. And most importantly, it's about finding the resources that will support you on that journey. And hey, we're here to help. So until next time, happy learning, everyone.
Hope you learn.